About 5 centuries ago, a British ship anchored in the cold coastal region of Massachusetts. There were about 100 passengers on this ship who settled a new colony near the shore, a colony they named Plymouth in memory of their homeland. Around this colony lay the same land where, for centuries, an ancient native tribe called Pekaniket had lived. One day, a man from this very tribe came among the new settlers of Plymouth, and surprisingly, he said in English, "Hello." This moment is still considered the most mysterious scene in American history. The question arises, how did that native man know the English language? And what is that historical secret that Americans have hidden from generations? What were those events that later shook the foundations of the American War of Independence? You are watching the final episode of Season 1 of Unlocked History Hub's History of America, where today we reveal the truth that has been hidden for centuries. Plymouth was, in fact, the second British colony in America. The first colony was established about 700 kilometers south of it, in Jamestown. The name Plymouth was chosen because the port in Britain, from where these people fled religious oppression, was also called Plymouth. Most of these passengers were followers of a particular religious sect, who were later called pilgrims, meaning those people who set out on a sacred journey for freedom of belief. Troubled by religious pressure, in 1620 they boarded a ship named Mayflower, undertook a long sea voyage, and after 65 days reached the shores of the New World in December 1620. Women, children, the elderly, all were with them. But no sooner had the colony been founded than hardships began to welcome them. The first trouble came from the weather, severe cold, icy winds, and wooden huts that were helpless. The second trouble was the land full of sand, where farming was almost impossible. The third trouble was death, a disease spread that within a few months wiped out nearly half of the settlers. These people were no longer capable of survival, and the last ray of hope was fading. But in those days, an event occurred which they believed to be a miracle. Near Plymouth lived a powerful tribe called Pekaniket. This tribe kept watching how these newcomers were suffering. One day, an influential man of the tribe, Samoset, reached Plymouth. He had learned the language from the English fishermen who had been coming to these coasts for centuries. That is why the word hello from his lips was nothing short of a marvel for the English settlers of that time. Samoset had actually come on a mission of help, but this help was conditional. The Pekaniket tribe wanted guns, gunpowder, weapons that could destroy their enemies. Their chief Massasoit contacted the English, and thus began a friendship built on needs. But the first need of the English was fertilizer, a method of farming. The native people told them that the secret of growing crops in sand was fish. Bury a dead fish in the soil and grow crops over it. The English adopted this method, and soon the barren land turned into fields of waving corn. This success was a moment to celebrate, but before celebrating, the English had to repay their promise to the Pekaniket. On the night of the 14th of August 1621, English and Pekaniket warriors attacked the village of an enemy tribe. Filled with bullets and gunpowder, this attack took dozens of native lives within moments. When they returned, a victory celebration was held, the same celebration which later came to be known as Thanksgiving. The celebration continued for 3 days. 50 English and 90 Native Americans, including Chief Massasoit, participated. The natives brought deer, wild fruit, and game. The English served turkey and their own dishes. But this truth is rarely written in the pages of American history. This celebration was held over the bodies of those who had been killed in that very attack. Time passed. The success of Plymouth pulled thousands of new settlers from England. The coasts of New England became crowded even in summer. And when the English gained power, their real face appeared, the plan to enslave the native people. In 1636, the war began that proved the English friendship was a deception. Only 15 years later, they targeted another large tribe, the Pequot. In this war, English commander John Mason brought devastation upon the native people, and the balance of power in North America changed forever. At the height of the Pequot War, English commander John Mason made a terrifying decision. He set fire to a large village of the Pequot tribe. About 700 people were trapped in the village: women, children, the sick, and the elderly. The fire surrounded the entire village within moments. People kept screaming, kept calling for help, but not a single English soldier felt mercy. Whoever tried to escape alive was shot and killed. When the flames of the village died down, the whole area was filled with burned bodies. Seeing this scene, John Mason said a sentence that is still considered a dark stain in American history. He said, "God is laughing at those who stood against the believers of God. God has turned them into a burning furnace." While counting the bodies, Mason called it God's just judgment. Another British commander, John Underhill, who participated in the massacre, tried to give religious justification for the killing of women and children. He said that religious books sometimes command that women and children also be killed along with their fathers. Instead of hiding this brutality, the British insisted on proving it legitimate. David Stannard, author of American Holocaust, writes that New England's religious leader Cotton Mather, in his book Magnalia Christi Americana, declared this slaughter a victory, writing, "In just 1 hour, 500 to 600 savages disappeared from the world, people who were a burden on the earth." This was their ideology, and it was these very beliefs that wiped out the existence of the Pequot tribe. The war continued for almost a year, and in the end, the Pequot nation was completely destroyed. their villages were burned. Those who survived were tied with ropes and either thrown into the sea or sold as slaves. When this nation was wiped out, the English erased their name from the map as well. The river in Connecticut, that was called Pequot River, was renamed Thames River, and an entire town that was known as Pequot was turned into New London, and that name still exists today. But the destruction of the Pequot people was only the beginning. About 38 years later, another great war erupted, which extinguished the last hope of freedom for Native Americans. The same Pequeniket chief Massasoit, who had helped the Plymouth colony and participated in the first Thanksgiving, died in 1661. After his death, the fragile friendship between the English and the Pequeniket began to break. After Massasoit's death, his elder son became chief, and he abandoned his native name and adopted Alexander. Just as many natives of that era were forced to hide their identity and take English names. In 1662, the English accused Alexander of a conspiracy, arrested him, and tortured him. He died in an injured condition. Then his brother Metacom became chief, who changed his name to Philip, the same Philip who was later called King Philip. Philip tried every possible way for peace, but the English attitude had changed. They had begun to order the Pequenikets around. The Pequenikets were giving away their land in exchange for weapons, but in 1671, the English forced Philip to sign an agreement in which they had to return all the weapons they had already bought by selling their land. Now they had neither land, nor weapons, nor dignity left. Philip was no longer willing to tolerate humiliation. The interference of the English had increased so much that some Pequenikets had been converted to Christianity and assigned to espionage. In June 1675, one of these spies was found dead. The English blamed the Native Americans and hanged 3 men. This was the spark that ignited the war, and thus King Philip's War began. This war lasted from 1675 to 1676. For the Native Americans, this was the last war of freedom. Under Philip's leadership, the Pequeniket fought bravely, but they had almost no weapons. Most of the fighting was done with arrows, bows, and spears, while the English had gunpowder, guns, and allied tribes. The English began burning native settlements one after another. Seeing the settlements burning, religious leaders like Cotton Mather wrote about these scenes and called them barbecues. Some tribes sided with the English, and along with them, the last resistance of the Pequenikets was crushed. Philip's family was captured first. His wife and his 9-year-old son were enslaved. And finally, in August 1676, news arrived that Philip was present in his ancestral region. The English, along with their native allies, launched an attack. Philip resisted until the end, but was killed while fighting. The tragic thing is that the man who killed him was a member of his own tribe, who had become a Christian and was now part of the English army. Even after Philip's death, the English did not stop humiliating him. His body was cut into pieces and burned. His hands were given to the killer as a reward. One hand he sold, and the other he kept as a souvenir. Philip's head was brought to Plymouth and placed on a spear outside the gate of the settlement. His head hung there for 25 years. The skull of New England's last king became a spectacle for people to see. After Philip's death, the English celebrated because the last major defense of the Native Americans in New England had come to an end. In that era, when August 13th was declared a day of Thanksgiving, another story was also buried in the background. King Philip, whose father had cooperated with the British, and the man who had taught them the skill of growing vegetables in these lands, is today remembered in Massachusetts through his statue, right where he once ruled. But behind this tradition of Thanksgiving was also a dark chapter, which Americans today prefer to hide from their new generation. With time, Thanksgiving Day became a traditional festival, which is now celebrated on the last Thursday of November. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln declared this day a national holiday, and this tradition continues to this day. But for the present native tribes of America, this day is not joy, but a memorial of sorrow, a national day of mourning. After King Philip's devastating war, the English had established complete control over New England. The Native Americans, deprived of their lands, were confined to limited regions. Meanwhile, settlers coming from Europe were rapidly spreading across America's coastal areas. The environment of America was so favorable for them that the average height of the coming generations increased by up to 2 inches. Every household was having an average of 8 children, and no power existed that could stop this growing population. Thus, the settlers multiplied to such an extent that today 1 out of every 10 Americans is connected to their bloodline. The Plymouth colony became like a seed, from which within just 1 century, 13 English colonies sprouted along the American coast. During this time, France was also occupying vast regions. Much of present-day America and Canada was under its influence. Meanwhile, Spain had established its colony in Florida. The way these powers fought in Europe, similar confrontations were happening in their colonial territories as well. This struggle for borders and power took the shape of a major war in 1756. The Native American tribes also joined their preferred European powers, seeing opportunity and advantage. A local military force of the British colonies, known as the Colonial Militia, was also part of this war. Among these soldiers was a young officer, George Washington, who would later become the greatest figure in American history. Eventually, the European wars were settled in 1763 through the Treaty of Paris. France had to withdraw from America and Canada. All French territories of Canada went to Britain. While the French regions of America were divided between Spain and Britain, British control over Florida was also formally recognized. The lands of the Native Americans, which were still autonomous, now came under British control. Thus, British power expanded from the 13 colonies to the entire region. This was the most powerful era of British rule in America. But immediately after the 7 Years' War, the British Empire made two such mistakes that shook the foundations of this entire power. The first mistake, to compensate for the financial losses of the war, Britain imposed new taxes on the American colonies, especially a heavy tax on tea. But taxation without representation was unacceptable to the Americans. The second mistake, entry of European settlers into the territories gained from France, was prohibited. These regions were reserved only for Native Americans, the Red Indians. Furthermore, the settlers who lived near these regions were forcibly relocated elsewhere. The burden of taxes, and the eviction of settlers in the name of protecting native lands. These two decisions became the seeds of anger and rebellion in the American colonies. The rebellion began in Boston, about 70 kilometers from Plymouth. Then a painting was published in an American newspaper, an image that transformed sparks of protest into burning flames. This very scene later laid the foundation of a new nation, the United States of America. How did all this happen? Why did the attempt to benefit the East India Company become a loss for Britain instead? What was that party which changed the map of the world? You will see all of this in Season 2, Episode 1 of the History of America. Friends, with this episode, Season 1 of America's history comes to its completion. How did you find this season? Do share your feedback. Season 2 will be in front of you very soon. To watch all episodes of Season 1, from the discovery of America to the brink of independence, tap here. And here see the unbelievable true stories of our universe.